Okay, so welcome to Raw Jobs. I'm just going to jump right in. So my name is Megan Forgrave, and I work for the Bush Foundation. I always start by telling people this is no Bush you've probably ever heard of before. We have a thing we say, it's not the president, it's not the beer, it's not the beans. We were started by Archibald Bush, who was one of the longtime executives at 3M. So that's what the Bush Foundation is. My title here is Communications Program Manager. I work in downtown St. Paul, and salary is like a range between 80 and 90,000 for my position. And I've been in this specific job for 4 years, and total been in this field in the working world for like 15 years. And that is my contact information if anybody wants to learn more. I also I'm going to take a quick second to explain when I say foundation. I think a lot of folks out there get nonprofits and foundations confused. So just as a base amount of information, basically nonprofits are often like doing really good work in the community and having to raise money to do it. Foundations, generally speaking, have a bunch of money to give away to those nonprofits. So my job is giving money away. So that is what we do. So basically, what I actually do all day. So my day is pretty normal, like a lot of people. It's like generally 9 to 5-ish. It's pretty flexible. Our culture here is just like very flexible. A lot of family people here. Occasional evenings and weekends. Sometimes I have some travel. About 60% of my time when I look at my calendar each week is in meetings, like a lot of meetings, either with my team or with like committees across the foundation or like getting stuff done with groups, like working meetings. And then another like 40% is working at my desk. And then I also spend like some time out at events. So either attending events to like build relationships with people, or I'm sometimes hosting people and like representing the foundation. This is my office. And this is what I look at a lot all day long. When I added this to PowerPoint, it automatically put in a description that said a cluttered room. And that is very true. This is my Outlook calendar for this week. So you can see that like there's a lot of meetings on there. I would guess it's about like 25% are phone calls or meetings with external people. So either grantees that I work with or partners that we want to have relationships with in the community. And then like 75% are probably internal meetings. So just to give you an idea of my time. All right, so what do I actually do all day? So as I said, very high level, all of us at the foundation basically work to get money out the door to people and to organizations who are doing good things. So like, yes, we literally give away money. Our foundation has a regional focus. So most foundations have some area that they want to invest in, like make a difference. So we have a regional focus. We work in Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. And there's also 23 Native nations that share that same area that we invest in. Our big goals that we work on, we don't have like super specific community issues. Like some foundations are like, we invest in like health or we invest in the environment. We are issue agnostic. So we give money out to all kinds of people, but basically it's these two things is, are they helping to solve problems in their community? And or are we helping in some way to help people be better leaders, like helping equip people or connect them so they can do their work better? So my personal expertise and my role here is related to helping people become better leaders. And I have a specific focus on events. So how are we bringing people together in person to build their skills and their networks? So one thing I thought I would share is you could just say like it's event planning, and it is, but we kind of have this sweet spot where what we do is somewhere in between just like a fun cocktail party and like a super boring conference. We try to make events that are super engaging. They have some content to them, but it's not going to be either one of those two things. So we try to do something right in the middle. So basically what we're asking is how can we either build our own events that we're offering, or how are we supporting all the other existing events out there that are already doing this stuff? that are inspiring people, equipping them, and connecting them so that they can do their work more effectively. So how can we get people to think bigger and think differently about what's possible in their communities? That's like the goal of what I try to do. So boiling that down a little bit more, what do I do all day? It really depends, actually. So some people have jobs where like they're doing a lot of the same stuff every day. And I have these projects that are either like every other year or a couple times a year. So my work changes drastically depending on either which year it is or what part of the year it is. So I boiled that down into like a couple different types of projects. So I've got some very, very long-term event planning projects that I lead. So every other year, we host a really, really big event that we call Bush Connect. It basically brings together about 1,000 people who are grantees, other leaders, and we put on all this program. We take over the Guthrie Theater for a day and a half. So I'm responsible for directing that. The next one won't be till fall 2020, but we're already kind of planning for that. So as an example of things I actually do, like last week I toured some additional event spaces near the Guthrie. I'm right now building out our like 18-month timeline. I'm having a lot of talks with vendors to get contracts in place, stuff like that. So that's like a 2-year project. Then on off years from that, when we're not having the big event, we are actually partnering with national events, and we take people from our region out to those national events. So I think of it as like I'm kind of a camp counselor for adults. So basically, I'm making sure that they have like all the information they need. I'm sending them emails this week with all these details, writing conversation prompts in the Facebook group to help them get to know each other. When I go to these things, I'll host like a breakfast or a dinner for just our folks who are there from the region so they get to know each other. And that's like, each of those events are probably like a 6 to 12 month planning process. So those are happening right now. So like we just had a group leave today for the Aspen Ideas Festival. I'm not going on that one, but some of my colleagues are. So I'm like, making sure everybody gets there okay and all that kind of stuff. So those are my 2 like big event projects. Another thing that I lead are these things, I put it under like midterm, and it's event sponsorship grants. So 3 times per year, we accept proposals from other people who put on events, and we review all those applications, and we give out money to other events that are already happening that we think people would benefit from. And so there's phases of that work all year round, like writing the questions people need to answer, actually writing up all the grant paperwork, but those are like every few months, there's different parts of that work. And then finally, some of my just ongoing work is communications work. I am on the communications team. There's 5 of us on the communications team here. So that's writing information, it's editing, it's messaging. So talking about how do we explain our programs. If any of our staff are writing articles places, we edit those things. We're updating the website, all of that kind of stuff. And then another big part of my work, we have a real big focus here on diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So for example, how that is like a project for me, this year I'm creating a whole bunch of guidelines for like, how do you put on an inclusive event? So for example, like, hey, you might want to think about having prayer space for people who will need it, or a nursing mother's room, or all these things that if we could get more people on board doing those things, it would help everyone in our region feel a little more welcome at events. So that's kind of an area of expertise for us. I'm going to be presenting on that at a conference this year. So that's another like chunk of my work that we try to keep moving the needle on. Everybody here has projects that they're working on in that area. So stuff that I look at. This on the left is a picture of my notebook. I've actually found it really helpful to just start every week. I actually write out my own calendar, so it's in my head, and I also create a to-do list for myself. So you can see some of the stuff I've been working on this week, like emailing those Aspen scholars, finishing this presentation, other stuff like that, creating contracts for the Bush Connect event. On the right, you will also see an example of like grant paperwork. So what we say is like, when we're trying to give out money, we actually have to like explain for our own staff and board, why are we going to give out this money? what's the impact we're trying to have, and we have to like, there's details, right? You have to figure out like who's the actual tech going to, how, all this stuff. So this is how we actually process those things. So high level, how does this job fit into the larger picture, or why is it needed? So basically at the very high level, philanthropy or like foundation work is a way to give money to organizations and people who are working to solve big problems in the world. These are typically things that aren't covered by government or business funding, so they need money to do those things, and that's where we come in. The events part of my work, basically we do it because we think people can solve problems and they can do better when they're connected, they know who to call on for things, and they have more skills in their toolbox. The grant making and relationship part of my work really is about like, to get money out the door, we need people who know like what's happening, what are the good events out there, what do the communities actually need. And so myself and my colleagues evaluate all those different opportunities to figure out how can we spend our money best. And finally, communications. Basically, we have to be able to clearly explain our programs and the opportunities for grants here so that people can use them. And we also really believe in sharing the stories of all the good work people are doing so that they can grow and gain momentum and people will pay attention to that work. So we do a little bit of all of that. What are you really good at, what are the skills somebody would need to be successful in this kind of a job? So for me, I'm an idea person. I love to brainstorm and figure out how to solve problems. So that comes in handy with all these different parts of my work. I'm super detail oriented. So a lot of these projects involve a lot of moving parts and details, and I'm able to stay on top of all those things. So similarly with multitasking, I can see across a big project like a 2-year event and keep all the different little parts of it moving along. I'm adaptable. I'm pretty comfortable with change. Like I'm very flexible. If something goes wrong, figuring out how to shift course and run into challenges, I'm very able to do that. I'm an includer and like a people person. So I'm with people a lot. I'm either planning for them, I'm working with them, I'm leading teams for these events. And so getting along with people is a big part of my job. And finally, being a good decision maker, which I will say is something I work at a lot, and it's kind of in progress because every single part of this, especially with event planning and stuff, you have to make a million decisions. And I tend to be more of a person who likes to research all the options. So this is something I keep working on, is like, how can I like quickly make decisions and keep stuff moving? So that's what I got. I hope it wasn't too jargony, but if anybody has questions, I am happy to answer them or expand on anything that I said.
Hey, Megan, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can.
Hi. So very interesting. I was curious how you go about assessing when events are successful versus when events are not. It sounds like you have these large multi-year projects that you're organizing, and I imagine that there's a lot of after the fact assessment of what went well, what didn't go well. So I'm kind of curious of that discussion.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So for our own events that we put on, we do a lot of surveying, and so we ask a few different things. So a couple of things for us that are important is we want to know, was this event actually helpful in making connections? So we'll actually ask people, how many people did you meet? How many people do you think you'll follow up with? And then we'll actually ask 6 months later, hey, how many people did you actually follow up with? Is this event worth it or not? Or what would have been helpful? So we ask things like that. We do ask for the normal, just if it's something that has workshops or sessions, we'll ask for the normal feedback on those things. We've also started asking a question about how could our event be more inclusive for all people, just so we can capture that and make sure that we're trying to do everything we can to make everybody feel comfortable. So whether that's people who need large print text, or they need, certain dietary restriction things or whatever, trying to be aware of all those things. And that question has helped a lot. So we have a lot of different metrics that we're trying to measure. I will also say, because we fund a lot of other people's events, we actually asked them the question of just like, what were your big goals and did you achieve them, or like how did you know, what made it feel like a success, or what did you learn from it? And so that can really vary based on the purpose of those events. But we rely on surveys and evaluation a lot.
Very cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question too. This is really fascinating because this is a world that I kind of like, kind of can figure out what it is, but I had a lot of like, okay, what do you actually do? So this is so good, Megan. But my big question is, where does this money come from? Like, how do you just have endless money to give away? Like,
good
is
question.
it just the Bush guy having personal money that he just wants to depart with, or what?
Yeah, great question. And I'm sorry I didn't cover that earlier. Yeah, so every foundation is a little bit different. For us, our money did come from Archibald Bush and his wife Edith. So basically, like, he started off as like an accountant at 3M and became the chairman of the board. So he grew a lot. He, had a lot of wealth because he was in very early on all of that stuff. They didn't have any kids, so he created this foundation, and this is where a lot of his money went to. So basically, when somebody gives a big pile of money, that's called like an endowment. So there's this pile of his money, which is the endowment. And what we do is we actually invest that money and keep making more money off of that money. So there are actually like IRS rules for foundations that say like you have to spend at least 5% of the big pile of money that you have every year. So we are actually a pretty big foundation, I would say. Like we have about $1 billion in assets, and we spend about 45 to 50 million of that every year. So we are trying to continue on indefinitely. So we basically spend the earnings on what's invested every year. There are other foundations that say like, we're not going to try and stay alive forever. We just want to give away all of our money. And some of them will give out more and more and more until they just have nothing left. And they'll be done in like 20 years. So there's kind of different lines of thought on that, but that's basically how it works. So it basically came from Archie Bush, and then the investment dollars and like what we're getting back from investments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, man, I did not know how that worked. I feel kind of dumb that he has
No,
just a ton of money he wanted to give away. That's kind of incredible. Do you have to deal with any of that money side of things, like tracking the money, investments? Like, do you tie into that a lot about budgeting and how much you're spending and like keeping track of it all?
Yeah, good question. I do. So that's a big part of my work too, is because I manage all these projects, every team here has specific budgets. So we check in actually quarterly on how we're all doing with our budgets. And part of that is because we have to spend all this money. So it's interesting because I come from a nonprofit background where it was always like, ooh, do we have enough money? Try to be real tight with our money and really careful about it. And here we do try to be smart about how we're using our money, but it's also like we need to spend a certain amount of money every year because we're required to. So it's kind of this interesting balance. And so, yes, I have budgets for like our event sponsorship program. I have X amount of dollars to give away each round. For our BushCon, like big event project, I have X amount of dollars and have to figure out how to divvy that up. Like, how much are we going to spend on speakers? How much are we spending on our venue? How much are we spending on food and everything else? So, yes, so I do work with budgets a lot, and I don't work as much with the investing side, but we do have a committee here that people could choose to be on if they're interested in that.
Okay, that's fascinating. Is Archibald still alive?
No, he's not.
Okay.
And the foundation is about like 65 years old or so. So it's been around for quite a long time.
Okay. Wow. Okay. I don't know, Peter, did you have any more questions?
No, it's very interesting. I was also curious about where the funding came from and how that played out. So that's great.
Cool.
Will you
well, the
will you
last,
go to those next couple slides? Yeah. For the next couple
yeah,
minutes.
I was gonna say I have one more slide, which is just a few resources that I thought I would share if people are interested. But basically, so here's the Bush Foundation website if people are more interested in learning about that. That explains like all of our programs. You can also read a lot of stories about grantees and like cool people in the area who are doing great work. Other resources I thought I would share. So one is like just I think this is a great website for like networking, for events, for like job or board or volunteer postings. Pollen Midwest is a great organization. They have tons of stuff on their website. So if you're interested in those things, especially in the Twin Cities, that's a great resource. For general leadership ideas and tips and training and stuff, I've started reading a lot of articles in the Harvard Business Review, and they have a ton of great stuff in there. Also, we've done some trainings with the Management Center on everything from like how to manage teams, how to delegate really well, all things like that. So I think that's a great resource. And then finally, I was just going to say for personal growth, I can go back. I used to be in newspapers, and then I was like a nonprofit communications director for a while. We never had like resources to do, like personality tests or anything like that. And here we do a lot more of that, and I have found it really, really helpful. So there are a lot of different things you can take to find out about your work styles, how you work with others, your conflict styles. We've used some different things. There's StrengthsFinder, Insights. A really good free one that I like is this one here that I listed called 16 Personalities. But I just think it's really invaluable if you're trying to figure out how you work best with people, how you gel with people, or like how you don't. And I just think it's really worthwhile to spend some time on. So those were a couple things I thought I would share.
Oh man, that's so great. Thank you for putting these in here.
Very cool. Thanks, Megan.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks so much, Megan.